My name's Mo Ewing, and I'm going to talk about Ceratodon purpureus today. For you vascular plant people, um, Ceratodon purpureus is sort of the common dandelion of bryophytes, Taraxacum officinalis. Um, but it's a disparaged species because let me get rid of that. Okay, there you go. It's kind of a disparaged species, but for two reasons. One of them is it's found everywhere. You're going to run into it in all kinds of habitats, and it's and the second thing is that if there are no capsules on it, it's very easy to mistake for other mosses. So you're likely to get, oh God, this is a ceratodon. That's what you kind of run into. But the thing that makes it the thing that you disparage it about is the thing that really makes it kind of an incredible moss. Um, Doing research for this presentation, I really got to appreciate the fact that it's really kind of the king of the heap because it's found everywhere. It's in every state in the United States. It's in every Canadian province. It's in most countries all across the world, and it's on every continent, even Antarctica. And in Colorado and New Mexico, you find it from the plains to the alpine. So it has an incredible geographic distribution. In terms of the habitat that it likes disturbed sites, and it's most abundant on exposed, that is sunny, compact, mineral, dry, gravelly, or sandy soil. But it's also shade tolerant, and it's common in urban and industrial areas because it's resistant to pollution. You find it along highways, and you find it in cracks in the sidewalk. Um, and it's also, you find it on tailings associated with coal and heavy metals. So this baby you find everywhere. And it grows on just about everything. It grows on soil, rock, humus, wood, old roofs on buildings, and sand, which is pretty unusual for mosses, and then in sidewalk cracks. So the question is, why is it so adaptable? Well, the main reason is because it produces a tremendous amount of number of spores. And the spores are filled with, I'm sorry, uh, it's yeah, it produces tons of spores, but in capsules. You can see here that just the huge number of capsules on here, and the spores that are inside them are really small, so they're very, very easily dispersed by wind. In genetic studies done of this, they found that uh, in comparing collections all over the world, that you find that there are genetic variations that correspond with longitudinal bands around the globe. So you have a certain genetic makeup of Ceratodon in the Arctic, in temperate zones, equatorial zones. The genetic makeup of these mosses varies depending on where it sits on the longitudinal axes. And the thought is that the major reason for that is because that's the way the wind moves around the Earth. And so um, uh, the uh, the uh, the the spores um, are dispersed across those uh, longitudinal bands, And that's one of the reasons that it varies so much depending on whether you're in the Antarctic or in Colorado. Um, but in addition to that, studies suggest that um, it it that it has rapid evolutionary adaptations. It's a very plastic species. It's variable, and you'll see that when you go out and collect it. It's variable. And one of an interesting study that was done um, was that they studied collections that were very, very close to. Um, Let me get my notes here. Uh, that were very close to zinc smelters. And they found in comparing those collections with collections that were further away that the moss developed a tolerance for metal pollution. And so the idea is that it can adapt very quickly and not genetically, but just by being very plastic. It can adapt to habitats that have that kind of thing in it. And in the Antarctic, it has an adaptation where it produces photoprotective pigments to protect it against UV radiation. It can survive in very hot deserts to 50 degrees centigrade. It can survive in the Antarctic winters to minus 40 degrees centigrade. And it photosynthesizes, it starts to photosynthesize at 0 degrees. So this moss is a very, very hardy guy. In the Antarctic, where things are really tough, it grows only 1 to 5 millimeters per year. Now, the other, so because it's wind dispersed, it's dispersed by wind using the spores. It's a kind of a classic pioneer species. One of its common names is fire moss because it is one of the first species of plants that grow after fire. And the more severe the burn, the hotter the fire, and the more sterilized the soil, the more quickly it colonizes. And that's because it loves mineral soils. So it is very often the first plant that you're going to see, the first plant, vascular or non-vascular, that you're going to see in a burned area. And if the area is really seriously burned with a very hot fire, it can dominate vegetation there for several years before the vascular plants come into that area, like fireweed. The other interesting thing about it is they found that uh, Ceratodon uses pollinators to disperse the sperm and bring the sperm to the female cells. And it does this actively. Male and female plants emit complex uh, volatile organic scents. And the female plants emit more of these scents and they attract springtails. And in Colorado, there are springtails that do this that are called snow fleas. And that's because I've never seen them, but evidently they appear on snow in the very late spring. But these female plants emit these scents, and it attracts them springtails to them, which help pollinate the moss. And studies that have been done where people have sprinkled springtails on Ceratodon, they've actually found that it does enhance. They do enhance fertilization. But the interesting thing is that the plants are actively emitting these scents. So let's take a look at Ceratodon. In general, they grow in dense tufts, mats, and cushions, and their colors are various colors of green, dark, brownish, light, and yellow. And the stems are 1 to 3 centimeters tall. Um, in its seta and capsules, the seta are 1 to 3 centimeters long. I mean, the seta are 1 to 3 centimeters long. That's this piece here. And the capsules are red, orange, or yellow. The capsules are oblong to cylindric, 2 to 3 millimeters long. And they're smooth to strongly sulcate, which means that sulcate means grooved when they get dry. And you can see the grooves in these dry capsules here. When they're not as dry, you don't always see the grooves, and you have to be careful because if you look at the capsules that are immature, they look totally different. They grow long and long and thin like this, and then they fatten out uh, as they get older. And the capsules are dark red. So when you see a ceratodon that's covered with these capsules, it's pretty easy to recognize. Moving on, the leaves are crowded, and they're erect or patterned, which means that they stick out up to 90 degrees, not 90 degrees, but near 90 degrees, 45 degrees when they're wet. And then when they're dry, they're contorted or somewhat crisped, and that's so they look like this guy here. Flora of North America says that sometimes when they're dry, they're straight. I'm not sure that I've ever seen them straight. I see them generally like this. The leaf shape is lanceolate or ovate lanceolate. This is more ovate lanceolate, or triangular. When triangular, when you describe that, the sides don't bow out. They go straight, pretty much straight up to the tip of the leaf. They're about a third to 4 millimeters long, and the costa is strong. There's your costa right here, and that's strong. The top of the leaf, the apice, whoop, there we go. It's pretty interesting. Um, the apices are acute to short acuminate, rarely obtuse, but they have these um, kind of serrations at the tip, which is I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. Well, that's not. I think let's say that it's unusual in mosses to see this, and it has the couple of the common names that it has is purple fork moss and purple horn tooth moss. I like the horn tooth because that kind of looks what I would think would be horn toothed. And then the costa is percurrent, which means that it doesn't quite make it to the end, and that might be this. It's hard to tell where the costa ends here, or it's excurrent, and you can see the costa here comes right out of the tip into these teeth. The margins are generally revolute to near the apex, and according to descriptions, they're rarely plain. Um, that's near the apex. and they're irregularly serrate to uneven or smooth distally. And you can see here the edges in the middle part of the leaf are pretty plain. They're not toothed. The cells are short rectangular near the base of the leaf. And they're the ones, some of the ones that I looked at are more rectangular, longer rectangular than this. And in the at the distal end of the leaf, at the end of the leaf, top end of the leaf, the cells are rectangular, and their cell walls are pretty even in terms of thickness, um, and they're often somewhat thickened and rounded on the corners, and you can see that. Well, let's say here they're somewhat rounded on the corners, and rounded on the corners here too. The inner region, which is usually down at this end here on the edge of the leaf, is not developed. So there's no difference between the bottom cells and the alar cells. So that's a description of them. And what I'd like to talk about now is that, if they don't have capsules, they're very, very, sometimes very hard to tell from similar species. Um, and the first one uh, that it's really close to is Hymenoloma crispula, which is this guy over here. Um, Stacy and I were looking at Hymenoloma crispula. It was used to be called Dicranoesia, and we were looking at some because they've split them into two species, crispula and Mula Hassini. And we were looking at one that had been identified as Dicranoesia, Hymenoloma crispula, but it turned out to be Ceratodon. And we we were looking at the thing and we said, I can't figure out what this is. Something that doesn't look right about this. And then Stacy said, "Oh no, it's Ceratodon," and that's what I mean. It's why it's disparaged. But anyway, um, the first thing you look for to try to tell the difference between these two is the habitats are slightly different, although they can overlap. Hymenoloma is usually found in forested areas on rocks and rotting wood, and Ceratodon you usually find in open, sunny areas. But you can find it in shade because it is shade tolerant, and it may overlap in terms of the habitat that you're in. But another thing that you look at to try to tell the difference is that Hymena leaves are strongly crisp, and you can see these are all crisped up into little, almost bundled. And Ceratodon, the leaves are less crisp. They're crisp, but they're kind of, well, you can see it. You can see the difference between these. And I suppose after you see a lot of these, that you could just look at it and say, okay, well, I know where I'm going here. But uh, remember, Ceratodon is quite variable, and Hymenoloma is quite variable too. And so the next thing that you look at to tell the difference is the alar region. And in Hymenoloma, the alar leaves, which are here at the bottom of the leaf, are somewhat differentiated. Now we looked at some collections of these, and they weren't as differentiated as this. But if there's any differentiation between here and here, it's going to be Hymenoloma rather than Ceratodon because there's no difference in Ceratodon. And then another really subtle difference, and this is evidently the one that is the one that you can really rely on if you can see it, is that hymenoloma have striae, which are little lines, and if you should be able to see it. Here's you see these little lines that run down the leaf. Um, and there's that's the clearest one there. And what they are is pseudopapillae. And if you do a cross section, you can see them easier. And these run down the leaf in lines, creating these little striations. And as you can see in Ceratodon, you don't see the pseudopapillae anywhere. So that's the main way that you tell these two different species. I, in preparing this presentation, I talked to Russ Kleinman and I said, what's a species that you have a hard time um, separating from Ceratodon? And he said, um, Didymodon rigidulus. And I had never seen this plant. So I looked it up, and you can see that it looks pretty close to the same thing, particularly when you look at it close up here. These look a little different just because they're probably different moisture or something, but this looks really, really close. And in this case, the first place that you start is the same thing. You start with habitat, and Didymodon prefers moist, shaded places on rocks, cliffs, and boulders, and sometimes on soil. And as before, Ceratodon likes to be in the sun. So if you're, uh, so that's a suggestion that you're going to go one way or the other. Um, a way of telling them is after they dry out, the Dibodon, um, uh, the leaves are crisped in a different way than Ceratodon is. The leaves in Didymodon are incurved and twisted when dry. And the leaves in Ceratodon are just kind of curled up in all different directions. So that's a subtle difference. So the last thing that you look at is look at the tip. And if you have a leaf with these little teeth at the very end of it, that's going to be a ceratodon, because Didymodon, the leaf tips uh, ends bluntly and doesn't have any teeth on it. So that's the major way that you can tell those differences. So I have to get to the end here. That's it. Oh, there it is. That's it. Thank you very much.